So let's look at this Savile connection to the royals. Savile himself, I write here, would boast about his connections to the royals, and it was publicly acknowledged that he was a regular visitor to Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, that's where Princess Diana lived, after the marriage ended with Prince Charles, and Highgrove, that's the country estate of Prince Charles as he was then. And Christine Fitzgerald, this friend of Diana, who I spoke to at length, told me how Savile had been a close friend of Prince Philip until they had fallen out after a, quote, big row. And Savile told Esquire magazine about his involvement with the royal family, quote, "The thing about me is I get things done and I work deep cover. I've known the royal family for millions of years, or for 1,000,000 years. And like I say, according to the UK Daily Mail, at the time of Savile's death, he was used as an intermediary in an attempt to resolve the differences between the Prince and Princess of Wales shortly before their split. And he said that he was invited to regular meetings with the royal family because, quote, "I have a natural, good, fun way of going on and we have a laugh." And I ask here, would one of the world's most powerful families invite an aging disc jockey into their inner sanctum so often because he gave them a good laugh? And let's just have a look at this. The police, it's now well established, knew what Savile was doing. And I know from research over the years, and also seeing some documentaries on the TV, that the intelligence services and something, a branch of the police called Special Branch, which connects into the royals and royal protection, etc. They know everything about those that are going to meet the police, meet the royals. I remember seeing a documentary once when a guy was going to make a protest at a royal event with the Queen. And he hadn't told anybody, or thought he hadn't. And yet, when he turns up, the police knew all about him. And so we're being asked to believe that a record-breaking paedophile and supplier of children to the rich and famous was known about by the police, therefore known about by the intelligence services, my goodness, known about by Special Branch in terms of what he was doing. But the royals didn't know. And you know the thing that really kind of hits me about that whole Savile situation is that it was so bloody obvious that the royals knew all about him and yet got away scot-free in the aftermath of the revelations about him. That's how this network watches its own back. But it goes further. Lord Mountbatten was also connected to the abuse of children in Belfast, Northern Ireland, at a place called the Kincora Boys' Home. And another guy connected to that was the former British Prime Minister, Edward Heath. Now, I've already mentioned that Lord Mountbatten brought Savile into the inner sanctum of the British royal family, but he was also a close friend and associate of Edward Heath. And Edward Heath was someone in the 1990s, as I was investigating all this, who came up again and again from people who said they'd been abused by Edward Heath. And this is the guy that I had the very strange experience with in a Sky News studio when I was a spokesman for the Green Party, in which the guy's eyes turned completely black, Edward Heath. What happened was that for the first time ever, the Green Party was predicted to get a lot of votes in a European election at the end of the 1980s. And so I was invited onto a Sky News election program when the results were coming in to comment on them. And I turned up and I was met by this lady, and she said, "Okay, I'll take you to makeup." And I walked into the makeup room, and the door was open like here, and there was no one there, or I thought there wasn't. So she led me to a chair, and she said, "Someone will be in a minute." And then something caught me to me right. I looked across, and there's Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of Britain, still a member of Parliament, who'd just been on the show, it turns out, to be interviewed and was waiting for his makeup taken off. And he was behind the door. That's why I didn't see him. And I looked at him and I kind of nodded, "Hello, mate, all right," as you do. And then this very strange experience happened. He kind of turned and looked at me. Never said a bloody word, mind. And his eyes, well, first of all, he had this inquisitive look on his face, which I didn't understand. It was like, like he was seeing something. And then his eyes started at the top of my head and slowly went down to the floor and then went back again. And then he turned, looked back at the mirror, never said a word. And the thing was that while what I described as this scanning was going on with his eyes went totally black. I mean the whites. Everything went pitch black. And later, actually some time later, I came across the fact that these black-eyed people where that happens has actually been experienced all over the world by different people. And what was kind of interesting, bringing it back to what I started out with in terms of the non-human entities, is when I looked at his eyes and they were black, it was like looking through him into another dimension of reality. And he was definitely, shall we say, different to what we call human in that sense. And he was famous for being a yachtsman, and he would go to Jersey, Edward Heath, on his yacht. And Savile also visited a children's home on Jersey, which then became the center of another pedophile scandal, which was shut off. And so you've now got Savile massively connected to the Royals, massively connected to Heath. And this situation with the children's home in Jersey, Haute de la Garenne, or Forest Heights it was called. And it was a children's home, actually detention center, from 1867 to 1986. And children were obviously supplied to the rich and famous from there. And a genuine police officer, somehow, his name was Lenny Harper, got put on this case to investigate what was happening and the historic abuse at this children's home. And he started to get somewhere. Very dangerous when you do that. And so he was then accused by the authorities on Jersey. I mean, you wonder why, of some crime or other. And he was taken off the case. Also, Harper's boss, the Jersey police chief, a guy called Graham Power, was also suspended. And as I say here, neutralized as part of the cover-up. And other police officers were put on the case and, of course, got absolutely nowhere. And there was another ring that I highlight in the book in Belgium, which went into the aristocratic, royal, political arena. And it was the guy, the center of that was a guy called Marc Dutroux, who went to jail for it. It was absolutely horrible what went on. But of course, all the major players, they never got caught. They never got arrested or anything. And they too had a police officer who was determined to get to the bottom of it. And what happened to him? They found some spurious reason to take him off the case. This is how it works. There's someone else another example, because it's very important to realize why these people get away with it. And I highlight here a guy called Detective Chief Inspector Clive Driscoll, who told the Daily Mirror how he faced disciplinary action when he mentioned the names in a private meeting of alleged paedophile politicians abusing children in Lambeth in London. He said, quote, "There were allegations made by several people, but I never had a chance to investigate them because I was moved before I could do so." Once he was moved, after disciplinary action, the disciplinary action was dropped once they got rid of him. And Anna Tapsell, I quote here, chairwoman of Lambeth's Social Services Committee, said that when she questioned the commitment of the police to investigate the Lambeth paedophile ring, a police officer arrived at her home to, quote, warn her off. So when you, and I also talk here, by the way, about Heath and what he did to children, which is absolutely bloody horrific. And these rings go into all these different institutions. And so Jimmy Savile, who the royals knew what he was doing, was knighted by the Queen, Sir Jimmy Savile, and also given a papal knighthood by Pope John Paul II of the Roman Catholic Church. And I write here that Savile was also a staunch supporter of Israel and a serious Zionist who described himself as the most Jewish Catholic you will ever meet. And claims that he said to have berated the Israeli cabinet in 1975 for being too soft with the Arabs after the Six-Day War, and lived in the heart of the Jewish community in Leeds, where he raised considerable amounts of money for their causes. And someone else who comes up in terms of Savile, Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher was a close friend of Jimmy Savile, and I write here, the implications of his close relationship to the royal family equally apply to his close friendship with the late Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, with whom he claims to have spent many New Year's Eves during her more than a decade in office. It just so happens that the Thatcher government, I write, and the Conservative Party in the 1980s, which is her period, was alive with paedophilia, and it was revealed by some non-mainstream publications that this connection was going on. And the same would apply to the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, I'm sure, and certainly to the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States, because these rings are what hold this one-party state together, and like I say, offer so many blackmail opportunities. Now, Margaret Thatcher was always quoting her father and was very much her father's mentality. And he was kind of puritanical and very much honed her character that she showed in her time in politics. But he was a Methodist preacher and a bigwig in the town of Grantham in Lincolnshire in England. And he was accused by a number of people of sexually abusing young girls. I mean, it's bloody everywhere. And a political biographer, Professor Bernard Crick, highlighted this and reported a Grantham friend as saying, older teachers all remembered their difficulty in trying to steer girls away from taking jobs at his shop, because he ran a shop in Grantham, which very much, like I say, her whole mentality came from that background. And he says the teachers were frightened to hint at the real reason they were steering these girls away. And that's because Roberts, her father, was a big wig in the town, Alfred Roberts. And so in this same period, you had these pedophile allegations against many members of the Thatcher cabinet of the time. And her Svengali and very close Thatcher aide was a guy called Lord Alistair McAlpine from the McAlpine Construction and Civil Engineering Company family. And he was a former treasurer of Thatcher's Conservative Party and very much a Svengali to her. And later, when he was then living in Italy, he was the center of another pedophile scandal. In the wake of the Jimmy Savile revelations, the mainstream media started taking a bit more interest in these things. And a guy called Steve Masham was interviewed on the Newsnight BBC current affairs show. And it was circulated, I remember it was circulated during the evening, that in this interview, Newsnight was going to name a famous guy who was accused of pedophilia. Well, I watched that interview that night, and he didn't name him. They cut that bit out. So speculation started on who it could be, and the name came up of Lord McAlpine, this Thatcher aide. And actually, Lord McAlpine had a collection of drawings and artwork of semi-naked children, which were the work of this artist who eventually, some way down the line, went to jail for pedophilia. So you see this recurring theme everywhere that you look. And so what then happened is McAlpine threatened to sue, and did, some of them, anyone that linked him to pedophilia. Even though he hadn't been named by them, he said, "You are indicating it was me." And he won big payouts from independent television and from the BBC as a result of that. And in the biggest secret, in 1998, that was published, I frickin' named him as a pedophile. And he never sued me at the time. And when all this was going on, and people were kind of indicating it was him, and there were payouts in libel actions, I was naming him as a pedophile. And never came for me. Even though you would think that would be a certainty, but no. He was part of a series of revelations that involved a magazine called Scallywag. I remember reading that magazine. And Scallywag, that was eventually taken down by the Conservative Party, was naming names of these pedophiles and what have you in Britain. And so what happened in the end is this Steve Masham, who was saying that he was abused by Lord McAlpine as a kid, he eventually, amid all the publicity of the time, retracted what he said. And the reason he retracted it, and the background to it, is absolutely ridiculous. McAlpine made his denial statement, and suddenly Steve Masham retracted his decades-old claim that McAlpine was one of his abusers, a statement repeated only days earlier in part of that Newsnight interview that was not broadcast. Newsnight then made a groveling apology for naming McAlpine when they hadn't actually named him, and they'd taken it out of the interview. And this is the reason that Steve Masham's Messam said that he'd retracted. He said that the reason he recanted that night was on his not publicly mentioning the name of Lord McAlpine, was that he was shown a picture by the police of McAlpine in the last hour when he realized it was not the man who abused him over and over and over decades ago. So if we just kind of analyze this, it won't take long. The explanation for why Messam recanted is absolutely ridiculous. We're asked to believe, I write here, that in the 15 to 20 years between Steve Messam allegedly being shown the picture of Lord McAlpine by police and of him accusing McAlpine of sexually abusing him in a never broadcast part of the Newsnight interview, Lord McAlpine was constantly in the news through that whole period. He was constantly in the news, remember it, because he was a Svengali for Margaret Thatcher. He was a chairman of the Conservative Party. He was on the telly all the time in the television news. And we're being asked to believe that in all this period of 10 to 20, 15 to 20 years that Messam had been saying I was abused by McAlpine, that he'd never seen a picture of McAlpine and said, oh no, that wasn't the bloke. It was only when he was shown a picture by the police after McAlpine's statement dismissing the claims. And I say here, when I heard what Steve Messam had said, I Googled Lord Alistair McAlpine and up came a stream of pictures widely available way before in the last hour. So it was a total cover-up, and goodness knows what they said to Steve Messam to make him do it. And then there's another connection here to Margaret Thatcher and paedophilia. And that's an MP for Chester in the northwest of England called Peter Morrison, who is, and he's not with us anymore, but he was a well-known, it now turns out, paedophile. And he was a close aide, like McAlpine, to Margaret Thatcher. This was the same period that Thatcher and her husband, Dennis, were close friends of Jimmy Savile. See how it comes together. The prolific supplier of children for the rich and famous. And once again, the same question must be asked about the Thatchers as about the royal family. Do you mean the police and the security services wouldn't have told Margaret Thatcher what Savile was doing? So this guy, Peter Morrison, who was MP for Chester and North Wales, where Messam said he was abused by Lord McAlpine, is only 13 miles away from the place Wrexham where he said it happened. And Rod Richards, former Conservative MP and leader of the Welsh Conservatives, said publicly that he had seen evidence connecting this guy, Peter Morrison, to the North Wales paedophile scandal that was alleged that McAlpine was involved in. And Richard said, what I do know is that Morrison was a paedophile. This is the close aide of Margaret Thatcher going back to the time that she was running for Conservative leader because he was involved in her campaign team, Peter Morrison. And the guy said, and the reason I know that is because of the North Wales child abuse scandal. And so then we have Margaret Thatcher, towards the end of her period in office, making Peter Morrison a close aide, and he was a deputy chairman of the Conservative Party as well. But this is something I came across, and that is the diaries of a well-known former Conservative Party Thatcher minister called Edwina Currie. And I managed to get hold of a copy of her diaries that were published much later. But in those diaries, at the time all this was going on, she made the following entry. One appointment in the recent reshuffle has attracted a lot of gossip and could be very dangerous, she wrote. Peter Morrison has become the Prime Minister's, Margaret Thatcher's, parliamentary private secretary. Now he's what they call a noted pedicast, with a liking for young boys. He admitted as much. Wait for this. He admitted as much to the Conservative Party chairman Norman Tebbit when he became the deputy chairman of the party, but added, quote, however, I'm very discreet. And he must be, wrote Currie. She, Thatcher, either knows and is taking a chance or doesn't. Either way, it's a really dumb move. By then, Morrison had been a close aide to Thatcher for 15 years. What does Currie mean? Does Thatcher know? And Edwina Currie says also in this diary entry, Conservative MP Theresa Gorman told me this evening in a taxi coming back from drinks party at the BBC that she inherited Morrison's woman agent, who claimed to have been offered money to keep quiet about his activities. It scares me, as all the press know, and as we get closer to the election, someone is going to make trouble very close to her indeed. And Edwina Currie never mentioned or explained why she didn't go to the police or the media to demand something was done about Morrison when everyone seemed to know. And by the way, Edwina Currie, she was a health minister at one point, with responsibility for the high security hospitals under the health secretary, Kenneth Clark, and appointed Jimmy Savile to run a task force at Broadmoor, the prison, quote, hospital for the clinically insane, basically, which he exploited to abuse patients. And every time there was an effort to expose all of this, it was jumped upon. There was a guy called Geoffrey Dickens. He was Conservative MP, and he produced a dossier naming all these names in politics who were involved in paedophilia. And a guy who was the Home Secretary called Leon Britton, has his own story, said that he he didn't act upon the contents and has no recollection of it, he said. And that's funny because it was widely known what Dickens had found. And this connects into a lady who I met in North Wales when I was investigating this in the 1990s, called Andrea Davison. And we were swapping notes in the 1990s. It was at her home in North Wales, Anglesey, I think it was. When she was investigating the paedophile scandal herself, she was connected into the intelligence services too. And what they did with her is accuse her of a crime that actually never happened, and which there were no victims. And then she had to use her friends in the intelligence arena to get her out of the country, and she went to South America to avoid being jailed for a crime that never happened. And she talked about the North Wales police and the Derbyshire police raiding her home to remove files on child abuse, including what she'd been given by this guy, Jeffrey Dickens. And she said, many of my documents and evidence was stolen by the police. I'm reliably informed that they were worried in 2009 that because of Jimmy Savile, the VIP pedophile ring would be exposed, and they made an effort to, as the Derby police put it, to tie up loose ends. And then there's one other guy that I mention in the book. I'll mention many other people, but for this purposes of this show. And that was a guy called Anthony Blunt. Now, Anthony Blunt was connected to the intelligence services. He worked for MI5. And he was actually part of what was called the Cambridge Five. They were British intelligence insiders who spied for the Soviet Union. And 4 of them came to light. Blunt much later, and before him, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, and Kim Philby. And then there was this mysterious 5th man that's never been named. Well, I've named him. It's Lord Victor Rothschild, who basically ran British intelligence for a long period. And Anthony Blunt was sent by the royals to Germany to get various correspondence sent by the British royal family to the royal families of connected royal families of Germany after the war. And he was a talent spotter and recruiter for this ring of Soviet agents. But he was also appointed to be the keeper of the Queen's paintings as a reward for services rendered in hiding the Nazi truth about the Windsor Mountbattens, because the British royal family, the Windsors, are actually the royal family of Germany, a Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. And the Mountbattens, as in Lord Mountbatten, is also a German bloodline that was known in Germany as the Battenbergs. And so you can see the connection there between the British royal family and the German royals, or the German aristocracy. And he was appointed, Anthony Blunt, as surveyor of the King's pictures when he retired from MI5. And Anthony Blunt, I can tell you, was not just a paedophile. He was an horrifically brutal one who did unspeakable things to children. So here you have, oh, by the way, he was, I mentioned here that actually Anthony Blunt, who lived from 1907 till 1983, was born as the 3rd cousin of Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who became the wife of King George the Sixth, and is best known as the late Queen Mother, who had the image of being the nation's grandmother, but I can tell you that Princess Diana said that she was evil, which kind of fits. So that's just from one chapter of one book. And it's very topical and very relevant because, like I say, the Epstein network in the United States, this big furore going on now, is just one smear of a vast global web. And you've seen the way it plays out in Britain and plays out in America, all over America. It is extraordinary, and it's only when you get into the non-human reason for it that you see why it's everywhere. And it involves not just pedophilia, but Satanism. And, you know, when I set out on this journey in 1990, and I started uncovering this stuff, I thought, sod it. I'm not going to let fear of consequences stop this being exposed. And I certainly did that in this chapter in the Perception Deception. So I hope you've enjoyed the first show in this series. I'm going to be picking out bits from all my books on a range of different subjects in the series, and looking at the kind of things that happened and how the information came to me. And it's very well worth looking back. Because like I say, it can get lost, what's already been uncovered in all the new stuff that's coming out. So that's it, and I'll see you next time.